Good morning. Morning. Good morning. Morning. Thank you. Okay. One minor correction, Peter. I started in the Phillipsburg Rotary. I am now a proud member of the Madison Rotary, so I just wanted to get that out on the record, so because Barry Kroll would report me. It is certainly my pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning. I first met Derran at a Rotary Peace Conference in Vancouver beginning of 2018. Derran gave a very inspiring speech, very informative and highly entertaining. However, the highlight was when Derran performed a duet with Rotary International President Ian Risley. They sang Waltzing Matilda, and they were accompanied by the Langley Ukulele Ensemble. Right. Now, I don't pretend to have the credentials of a judge on The Voice, but I would advise Derran, don't quit your day job. The good news, however, is compared to the endearing Ian Risley, you were a regular Michael Bublé, right? Without further ado, please help welcome Derran to the stage, our Rotary Peace Scholar and an officer of the Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs for the United Nations, Derran Moss. No, I didn't. I have a video of that.
I 100% promise I am not going to sing. Chair and Vice Chair Peter and Drew, PETS committee members, District Governors-elect Mahbub, Karen, Ray, Cindy, John and Justin, and to you the Rotarians of 7210, 7230, 7255, 7410, 7475 and 7490, and to all of the magnificent collection of Rotarian clubs that we have collected here today, from Oyster Bay to Pearl Bay, Mountaintop to Pleasant Valley, Fishkill to Cresskill to Catskill to Peekskill, Great Neck to Tear Neck to Old Mamaroneck, Southampton to North Scranton, West Milford to East Northport, and all the colours of the Rotary Rainbow, from Greenville to Red Hook, Hazleton to West Orange. Whether you're staying spry in Tenafly or a booster for Brewster, Burnin for Vernon, had a great melt in Slate Belt, or a brawling in Pauling after a whiskey and rye, or as my mother used to say as I lay my head down to sleep every night, Jericho, Jefferson, Passaic, Chappaqua, Hoboken, Poughkeepsie, Paramus, Phoenicia, Peconic in summer, Secaucus in spring, Bermuda, Jamaica, Flushing, Wyoming. I didn't really understand it then, but it makes sense now. From the deep south to the true north, from the far east to the Midwest, red states, blue states, hot dates, and old mates, to the district governors, past district governors, the district governors-elect, the Rotaractors, the Interactors, and all of their beautiful benefactors, to the prescient presidents, the treasured treasurers, the alarmed, becalmed, but never embalmed sergeants-at-arms, and most of all to you, each and every one, Rotarians, friends of Rotarians, and to those here who go above and beyond in every time, who skew to the selfless few, who are committed to service, the workers, not the shirkers. You are out there, they are beside you, and if they are beside you, you should be beside yourself because you are magnificent. So give yourselves a hand because you don't have a leg to stand on. Good morning. The coffee is just kicking in. By way of very brief background, I graduated from law school in 1998 and from the University of North Carolina in 2004. Along the way, I've worked in courts, in counterterrorism, and in anti-corruption. I've been a lawyer, a political advisor, and a humanitarian. I was a teacher for 4 years, I worked in Afghanistan for about 2 years, and I was arrested in the Ukraine once. In that time, I have learned 3 things, and 3 things only. 1, kids are honest, devious, and cruel. 2, I have the genetic inability to grow convincing sideburns. And 3, the Ukrainian police have absolutely no sense of humor about their hats. I worked as a legal advisor in Timor-Leste, where my office mate was literally a crocodile, and I provided political advice in Afghanistan in much the same way that a Jack Russell provides financial advice to a burglar, loudly and in terror. And in 2002, I had the honor of being in the first class of Rotary World Peace Fellows at the University of North Carolina, which was an extraordinary program, but this being March Madness season, you'll forgive me if I'm a little emotionally fragile for the next couple of weeks. There can, ladies and gentlemen, be no doubt that the path that I have chosen has been greatly assisted and in many ways guided by the Rotary motto, service above self. And this remains, in my view, the core principles of how I try to live my life. I truly believe in service, of applying our collective gifts to the betterment of our community and not just to ourselves. I believe in equality, that the treatment we receive and the rights that we fight for in life should not be conditional upon our gender, our religion, our race, our wealth, or our sexual preference. And I believe in optimism and opportunity, that it's possible, even in the darkest and most dangerous, terrible and stressful times, to make tomorrow a little better than today. And there can be no doubt that today we live in contested times. We're frequently told we live in a binary world, that we must be with or we will be against. We live in a world of contracting vision, an age of looking away from the world and down into the black mirrored void of our phones in the apparent hope that salvation lies therein. Massive challenges face us as a species and as a planet. The 2018 Global Peace Index indicated a downward trend for the fifth successive year. 92 countries were less peaceful than in the previous year, only 71 were more peaceful. And humanitarian need is at an all-time high, with 131 million people estimated to be in need this year, requiring $21.9 billion in funding to provide them with life-saving support. If those in need of life-saving assistance were a country, it would be the 10th largest country in the world, asking for an operational budget of about the 110th largest economy in the world. To put that in context, last year here in the US, we spent $7 billion on nail salons, $14 billion watching the Super Bowl, $31 billion on flowers, and $32 billion on pizza. We also spent $686 billion on defense, and annually across the planet, the global economy last year, the cost of violence was $14.8 trillion, or nearly $2,000 for every person on the planet, compared to less than $3 that's being tried to spend helping those in most need. And amongst all this, environmental disaster looms ever closer, killing thousands, displacing millions, and costing billions. And at this point, you're thinking, great, they really got an inspirational speaker to start our day off on a really happy note. It gets worse, don't worry. But look, the upside of all of this, at this moment in history, is that our community is growing. It's no longer just those in our house, it's no longer just those in our street or in our neighbourhood, it's not even those in our city, our state, or even in our country. Our community is now defined, it must be now defined, by the challenges we face, these challenges that necessitate a communal response. In this global age of the butterfly effect, where flapping wings in Manila can cause flooding in Miami, what we must consider to be our community must be vast. And if we do live in contested times, as we seem to, then the only way that we win that contest is if our community perspective adopts the Rotary worldview, and it's outward and it's not relentlessly in. If the challenges we face, and first among them is peace, and as part of that, the defense of humanity, if these are the elephants in the room, then we cannot afford to be the apocryphal 5 blind men who are trying to describe the elephant based entirely upon what they feel. The first one feels the trunk and says that the animal's a snake. The second grabs an ear and says that there must be a fan. Third one grabs the leg that says be a tree. The tail is a rope. The side of the elephant is the wall. And then the fighting begins about what the nature of the animal is. Instead, we must step back and we have to foster the capacity to communicate, to coordinate, and to bring together our communities to address those seemingly insurmountable challenges. And this is the golden thread that has been my experience with Rotary for nearly 20 years, weaving its way through meetings and projects, some of which we see outside today in the booths, and experiences and explorations from Australia to Afghanistan to here in America. This is the strength and the community and the coordination that is required to meet today's challenges. And building peace is quite a challenge. In mid-February, about 3-4 weeks ago, I returned from 4 months working in Myanmar, leading the coordination of humanitarian operations by the UN and humanitarian partners in Rakhine State in the west of the country. Rakhine was where in late 2017, more than 750,000 people, the vast majority of them Rohingya Muslims, were driven from their homes by a campaign of brutal violence, rape and murder that's been described by senior officials as akin to genocide and ethnic cleansing. I told you it'd get a lot better. To give it a sense of scale, in the space of about a month, a city the size of Seattle fled Rakhine and set up camp in the once forested hills outside Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And when you look at the situation now and add in the host families and those who fled in the subsequent months, you're looking at a city of about the same size as Dallas, about 1.2 million people. And finally, to give you a sense of not just the scale, but also the severity of the challenge, consider that the population density of New York City, which we always think is fairly dense, is about 28,500 people per square mile. The population density of Kutupalong refugee camp is a little over 122,000 people per square mile. That's the city of Baltimore living in 3.5 Central Parks. There's some challenges there. But rather than focus, I guess, upon the macro, and happy to talk in detail about statistics and the terrible situation in both Bangladesh and Myanmar, I wanted to just share with you one experience from my time there. I was at a meeting on the ground floor of a home in Al-Mingala ward, which is a small, effective suburb that sits in the middle of Sitwe, the capital of Rakhine State where I was based. Now, as people are probably aware from reading the news, the Rohingya people are viewed by the Myanmar government as non-citizens, and those that remain in Rakhine are stateless, isolated, and denied access to critical services like health and education. About 128,000 Rohingya are imprisoned in what are effectively internment camps. And our Mingala ward is an even stranger and perhaps, in my view, even more horrific creature than that. When violence broke out in 2012 in Sitwe last time, the 4,000 residents of the Al-Mingala ward were effectively walled in to their own suburb, trapped in their own homes by a series of police checkpoints and barbed wire, unable to leave even to tend to their own shops, which are sitting only one street away. For nearly 7 years, this population has been trapped in that ghetto less than a quarter of a mile from my own office, an invisible, largely ignored community within the community. I'd gone there on this particular day to talk to them about their situation, to ask them what they needed, and to see for them what their views are and what the future held. Invariably, as these things do, the conversation turned to what they saw as were the larger challenges within Myanmar that had continued to drive hatred and discord and division within the communities. I asked my host on the day for his frank assessment of what the relations were like between the communities in Rakhine. My host looked at me, and he looked at the ceiling, and he looked at his hands, and he looked at outside the door where there was a well-armed Myanmar police officer clearly listening to everything that was going on. And then he looked back at me and he said, when the body is injured, perhaps a leg or an arm, it takes some time, but it can mend quickly. But when the body is more seriously injured, it takes time. Then he paused and he looked down briefly as this was being translated, and then he raised his head and he looked at me and he said, but this, gesturing at the world around him, this is cancer. We have cancer. And there was really nothing left for that conversation that I could say. And I raise this because it's really easy to forget exactly the kind of challenge that we collectively are trying to deal with. What you as Rotarians engaged in the programs like the Peace Fellowship and like all of the programs outside and like everything that you do as part of your community as service above self and like the United Nations, what you are trying to do is difficult. It's fiendishly, frustratingly, some would say even foolishly difficult. It is curing a form of cancer that permeates the soul, that twists the good into the horrific, corrupts and corrodes our very sense of self and our very sense of humanity. It's ugly and it can't be fought with weapons. In fact, it can't be fought at all. It can only be changed, convinced, cajoled and communicated with. If ever it was important to set a course for education, dialogue and peace, no matter if that course is difficult and uncertain and strewn with a history of failure, then that time is now. Our vision must focus not on the shoes on our feet, but it has to chart a course for a journey that no one else has yet to make. It must surpass expectation, upend existing thinking, reject comfortable rest, and challenge us to create a future that sadly we are unlikely to ever see ourselves individually. It's been nearly 15 years, I guess, since I graduated from the Rotary, as part of the first class of the Rotary World Peace Fellowship program in 2004. And it's therefore, I'm told, probably apt that I finally give my report card about how things are going. It's worth casting our minds back to 2002 when the first class of Rotary World Peace Fellows entered into what at the time was a very bold and, let's face it, very controversial decision and program for Rotary. I was at the time a lithe, slim-hipped, boyish figure with a powerful and compelling mane of student hair, reminiscent, depending upon your cultural reference point, of a young David Cassidy or a former Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi. And Rotary had finally got the World Peace Fellowship program off the ground. Now, I'd like to be able to report that since the implementation of the World Peace Fellowship program in the 17 or so years between 2002 and today, that we've seen big changes. I'd like to be able to stand here on the deck of the good ship Rotary and roll up the mission accomplished banner and say, job well done. But things are never quite that simple. In 2002, the war in Afghanistan was in its second year and the Taliban was in retreat. 2019, the conflict in Afghanistan continues and the Taliban are on the up and up. In 2002, Iraq was in turmoil. In 2019, Iraq and Syria are in turmoil, along with Yemen, DRC, Somalia, Burkina Faso, South Sudan, and take your pick of a number more. In 2002, the Earth Summit was being held in Johannesburg to discuss sustainable development. In 2019, we are somehow still in a conversation about whether or not climate change is a real thing. And I've got to say that though it may not be that simple, and though the metrics of quantitative success sometimes seem intangible, I've never been more convinced that a commitment by Rotary to strive for peace is not only justified, it is in fact necessary. Without a willingness to step out into the unknown, to face the inconceivable and the impossible, then we will remain forever locked in the same cycles of violence and the same cycles of greed. Rotary's reach must exceed its grasp, else what's a heaven for? Never has the need of the Peace Fellowships program, of this approach for education and searching for difficult answers to extremely difficult problems, never has it been more acute than now. We face a world that in certain parts is trending away from being more humane, trending away from more thoughtful engagement with our neighbours. We face a time where the impacts of decades of mistreatment of the planet are starting to be acutely felt, and we face a hinge point in history between the haves and the have-nots, and even more troubling, a chasm between the humane and the inhumane. It is a widening gyre that, I have to be honest, threatens to engulf us all. But through that gyre and through that chaos, the finest of gossamer threads is tethered to peace. And that is, in many ways, the last unicorn for us all. And like the UN, Rotary should be proud. You should be very proud of setting your sights upon catching that unicorn, whether through local initiatives or through global ones. Commitment, belief, passion, and vision saw Rotary all but eradicate polio, raising billions of dollars and boosting global awareness, not only through other people, but through the people who are sitting in this room. Peace for you is just the next target, and a UN Rotary alliance aimed towards that is a partnership that I firmly believe is unstoppable. Despite all of this outward approach and this adventurous approach from Rotary, I think finally what saddens me most about the state of the world and the state of politics in the world is how small we want to become. Less funding for aid, more fear of foreigners, of immigrants, of refugees, marginalisation of those who are different to us, embracing a nationalist, jingoist rhetoric and a viewpoint of the world that seeks to exclude rather than embrace. At a time when many around us are most in need, we are shrinking away in fear, becoming less relevant, less compassionate, less leaders. In short, we appear to be obsessed by those very few differences that divide us instead of the multitude of things that should bring us together. I'll end then, as I have in the past, and I apologise to those who've heard it, with a classic Emo Phillips story about a man walking across a bridge and coming across somebody who was about to jump off. And if I put myself in his place, I ran over to him and I said, "Stop, Don't jump, don't do it. And he said, why shouldn't I? And I said, well, there's so much to live for. He said, like what? I said, well, are you religious or atheist? He said, religious. I said, me too. Are you Christian or are you Buddhist? He said, Christian. I said, me too. Are you Catholic or are you Protestant? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. Are you Episcopalian or are you Baptist? He said, Baptist. I said, wow, me too. Are you Baptist Church of God or Baptist Church of the Lord? He said, Baptist Church of God. I said, me too. Are you Baptist Church of God original or are you Reformed Baptist Church of God? He said, Reformed Baptist Church of God. I said, me too. I said, are you Reformed Baptist Church of God Reformation of 1879? Are you Reformed Baptist Church of God Reformation of 1915? He said, Reformed Baptist Church of God Reformation of 1915. I said, die heretic scum, and I pushed him off. I thank and I commend all of you who are gathered here today looking for difficult answers to incredibly difficult problems, for expanding your communities and for chasing that last unicorn. It has been a great honour to join you here this morning for the sake of our children and for our children's children who will inherit our successes and our failures in any degree of magnitude. I sincerely hope that Rotary will continue down the path you have set towards education and peace, and will continue to embrace the true believers, the heretic scum, and all of us here in between. Thank you.
What a fun way to hear such a serious message. And so on behalf of the group, I would just like to say thank you very much. From me personally, the way he introduced all of who are here today, that is how I will already say thank you for all coming. So thank you very much for helping me. Okay. And with that then, we are already, at a close for this morning's session. And we're encouraging everybody to move on. It looks like I'm getting away from the back. Maybe you're going to help me make this message, but we're encouraging everybody to go to your district meetings. On the way out, there is a feedback survey if you need a hard copy. There is also a daily schedule if for any reason you want a hard copy of that. And I encourage you